Good evening, members and members of the press and public, if we have any here. Yes, we do. And welcome to the cabinet, this extraordinary cabinet meeting. Just some housekeeping to start with. If the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones and do not make or receive calls whilst this meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently be broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend filming? I presume the one camera over there might be filming. Welcome to the Thanet chamber. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. The following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 3, Councillors Everett and Wing. Item 4, Councillor Alban. Does anyone else wish to speak under 20.1? Councillor Austin.
Under 3 and 4, please, Leader. Thank you.
Sorry. Item 1 is apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Cupp this evening. Everyone else is present. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest to declare in the items of business on the agenda this evening? Item 3 is the independent review of Burst 4.5. To introduce, is my good self. A review of Burst 4.5 project has been undertaken on the recommendations of the Independent Monitoring Officer. The review was undertaken by the East Kent Audit Partnership, and I would like to thank Christine Parker, the Head of Internal Audit, for her detailed and thorough review of this project. Whilst the detailed management response is still to be formed, a corporate management team has accepted all 9 recommendations that have been made and intend to embed them in our overall ways of working, and specifically the delivery of major projects. I have every confidence that the Council will learn from this review and successfully deliver the exciting projects we have coming up over the next few years. I would ask Cabinet to note the report. To speak under 20.1, we have Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to join you in thanking Christine Parker and East Kent Audit for the report. I think it's been a very worthwhile exercise, and there's plenty for the Council to reflect on in terms of how it deals with future projects. Looking at the terms of reference, I was particularly struck by the multiple references to the concerns of the previous 151 officer and whether his advice was given sufficient weight. It's perhaps ironic then that when Cabinet did follow the Section 151 officer's advice in December 2019, and indeed it was the wishes of members of other political parties at the time, as I recall, the auditor appears to conclude that it led to a missed opportunity through an overcautious approach. The report acknowledges, but rightly doesn't explore, the issues between the senior officers that surrounded that decision. However, given that they existed and the extent of them, which we all know, it was difficult for members to be certain to what extent the advice they were receiving was being influenced by personal disagreements. That is probably a good reason for members to exercise caution, but it clearly wasn't a satisfactory situation. I think the report is very helpful in setting out why the Bam Nuttall pontoon was a sensible solution. But it's also clear that the way the whole issue had been approached by the 2015 to 2019 Council had contributed to a situation where any decision was going to receive a hostile response from outside the Council. I wasn't on the Council in that period, but I've told the story before of how I was approached at the election count by a member of the public who told me that officers had used the purdah period to circumvent the council's scheme of delegation and financial rules and issued a tender for replacement of the berth. That turned out to be for the appointment of a consultant with a value of about £20,000, if I recall correctly. But it was followed by any number of conspiracy theories about the procurement of the Bam Nuttall pontoons, the existing contract, the Brett's operation, and that the existing berth was apparently fit for purpose all along and didn't need to be replaced. So when it says at 4.34 in the report that the council's legal liabilities under the two agreements were known facts, I think we have to caveat that and say that they weren't accepted by a section of the community. And that was quite a large part of the backdrop to the noise that was coming from outside. Did this all arise because of poor project planning, inadequate communication and a lack of transparency prior to the autumn of 2019? Well, it's possible, but I also think it's equally possible that some people were never going to engage with the facts as described in the report and were only interested in an outcome that made it difficult or impossible for Bretts to operate at the port, which wasn't actually something the council could control. That doesn't excuse the council of the criticism that it failed to engage with the public to the extent necessary on this issue. But by the autumn of 2019, the level of vitriol and personally intrusive commentary being directed at senior officers by one or two people was such that it was almost bound to create a bunker mentality and the sense that anything they did say would be willfully misrepresented. And I think that was a factor in the council's failure to communicate properly. Insofar as the use of the second pontoon is concerned, this did have the appearance in the autumn of 2019 of being a solution in search of a problem. And the report addresses this directly in that the capital project for which it was intended to be used had never been brought forward in a proper way. And certainly some of us were uncomfortable with that at the time. I did speak to all the relevant officers about that project and they were all supportive of it. But even then there remained the issue of whether it was a suitable structure to be placed in the listed Royal Harbour, and as the report notes, it would have had to have been the subject of a listed building consent application anyway. I'm a bit puzzled by the statement at 4.7.3, which suggests that the process of decision-making around the purchase of the berth in August 2019 was not completed because the council was aware of a likely change in administration. And as I recall, the decision notice was issued on September the 20th and the change of control was on October the 10th. But this talks about August the 16th and the 23rd, which I think probably when it was added to the forward plan, though it's not actually clear. But as we know, the budget amendment wasn't completed because the decision was called in and the overview and scrutiny panel asked to see the legal advice about the procurement. But that doesn't explain any hold-up in August, if indeed that's what's meant by the paragraph. The report also says that all the key decisions were taken by elected members in public. One might suggest that the decision to seal the contract without the legal advice from planning was a pretty major decision, and there was no member involvement in that. That's because it was an operational decision to implement something that the Cabinet had already agreed. But I think we should consider whether an elected member should have been involved in any project management board, had one existed, not least to ensure that the risks are understood by members and can be communicated across the Council. It may well have been the right decision anyway, for the reasons the report set out. The pontoon was by far the cheapest option available to the Council, and it needed to be secured. Finally, this has always been a capital project that none of us wanted, but it's taken 8 years to bring to fruition. And if nothing else, as a Council, we do need to learn from it. And for that reason, I welcome the report and the light it sheds on the reason for delay.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. Yes, I mean, as long as all of this report, obviously, it is an extensive report and it's very in-depth, and that's why, obviously, the thanks go to the internal auditor. It actually spells out from back to 2015 when this all started. So the amount of work that's gone into that, and it actually is laid out in such a way that it's completely step by step through the whole process, through the whole timeline, and I think it's excellent detail, and hopefully it does lay to rest a lot of the conspiracies, theories that went on through those years. It is a lessons learned report, and that is something that can be utilised, the whole framework can be utilised against any future projects. So thank you for your comments on that. Next to speak under 20.1 is Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank all those involved for their efforts in providing information, feedback and in producing this report as part of the important recommendations of the IMO. I welcome the report and its findings. As stated in the agenda documentation, the legal basis for the review forms part of the IMO's recommendations under the Local Government Act 1999, and as such it is Thanet District Council's duty, both officers and elected members, to make arrangements to secure continuous improvements. To this end, I hope that the recommendations of this report, all of which have been deemed a high priority, will be fully understood and implemented in a way in which we, TDC, and implemented in all we TDC do from this point forwards. It is refreshing to read that the adoption and implementation of the recommendations set out within this review will strengthen the Council's approach to project management. This, in my opinion, is vital in order to restore public confidence in all we, when I use we, I do mean TDC, because it's a shared responsibility, do, and to ensure our finances are appropriately spent in order to maximise positive benefit and not create additional risks to council taxpayers. As you might imagine, I have a number of questions and/or points to make, and hope you will afford me the opportunity to do so. As I did before, I'm quite happy to submit these in writing afterwards if the response is needed.
I think on the time constraints, because other members obviously wish to speak, so if you could do that, then obviously it gives officers the opportunity to give you a very full and concise response.
Could I just read through the questions? So
yes,
that
if you could read through
okay.
them and then just accept that we'll receive a
Question
response.
1. What will these changes look like to residents and elected members? And will this involve additional training for both officers and elected members, particularly concerning the serious issue cited in the review, which focuses on the Council's lack of a project management framework? Question 2. I have to state, as have residents, that we are already worried about the potential loft developments at the port, especially given more than once it has been referred to as a build it and they will come approach, with the apparent lack of a clear documentation, business case plan or review of the worst case scenario around future running costs, berth concessions, liabilities, as well as potential need for appropriate planning, marine licence and further environmental assessments. How can elected members and, more importantly, residents be certain that future projects, particularly on the port and all those involving large sums of government money we have been lucky enough to receive, will be managed in a way that will ensure these lessons are learnt and fully applied? And what difference will elected members and residents see in project processes? Question 3. If elected members and residents feel the lessons of this review are not being applied to future projects and that history is indeed repeating itself, what recourse will they have to take their concerns to officers at TDC, and if unresolved, back to the IMO, the East Kent Audit Partnership and the Independent Auditors Grant Thornton? Question 4. Point 2 of the corporate objective states that we, TDC, will continue to look for viable future for the Port of Ramsgate and Royal Harbour for the benefit of the town and wider district. Given the historic and very generous lease and facilities agreement associated with Berth 4-5, which clearly places a disproportionate burden on Thanet's council taxpayers over an extraordinary length of time, how can elected members and residents be confident that first of all, this will not happen again, that viable will mean profit making and not loss generating, that measures will be in place to ensure all future proposals are transparent and fully scrutinised by Cabinet, full Council and other appropriate committees, including over and scrutiny before final decisions are made, that if the present loft proposals for Ro-Ro and a ferry are not viable, do we have a plan B and is it part of our business case plan? With regard to the report evidence concerning delays caused by the need for an environmental impact assessment, the review itself at page 5 states that the 2015 project bid identified a number of key milestones, including the requirement for a marine licence and environmental study work. Alongside residents, a small number of councillors, including myself, have consistently expressed the need for a marine licence and environmental impact assessment. We have been accused of costing the authority money, creating delays to this project and wanting Bretts removed from the port, when all we wanted was due diligence and process to be followed, which this review and its recommendation indicates could have been managed a great deal better. In finishing, I would like to quote again from this report, point 4.14.3 states that the lack of transparency is a symptom of poor governance. Indeed, during a members' briefing many months ago, I requested the business case and plan and was told by the leader at the time it's not TDC's responsibility. It is clear council processes and structures for projects were missing, and the present culture of the council contributed to the failings. And as a result, we have a shared responsibility for where we are, and we must all look to what we should have and could have done to ensure we TDC do not repeat the mistakes of the past. So I welcome the report, and I hope we really do learn some serious lessons and progress forward, because I think we have a shared responsibility for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Hopefully we've got a note of all of those questions, but if you would like to send them in, that will be very handy. But I would like to comment on a couple of points you made. You referred to the Ro-Ro berth. Of course, 4.5 isn't the Ro-Ro berth, and that is a completely separate project. And the business case for the Ro-Ro berth will be the responsibility of whoever takes up the concessional bid. So we are not the people to be writing the business case for the Ro-Ro. That is down to the organisation that would be bidding on the concession, but that is not for tonight's discussion. So obviously that there wouldn't be a response necessarily from that part of it. Also, you make comment about scrutiny. Of course, scrutiny is the responsibility of the members, and you know, if the members don't show up to do the scrutiny, then that's where the whole process has to take place. That is the whole purpose of local government procedures. The council, the cabinet present the projects, and then it gets called in or comes to scrutiny. Scrutiny can obviously bring any project they like to their meetings with the blessing of the chair. But it is the responsibility of the scrutiny panel to do this. One of the best scrutinisers I've ever seen in this council is the late Peter Campbell, who he was absolutely excellent, but the only way he was excellent at scrutiny was because he read everything back to front and round the wrong way. And I think, you know, every single councillor is responsible, apart from the cabinet, obviously, to make sure that they do bring the cabinet into account. So there has to be some fault lie there with members, let's say, maybe lack of attention in some of the areas that they could scrutinise. That is the meeting to bring these items to. So this is a lessons learned, and I think this is an excellent review and document, and I am sure, as I said in my speech to the item, was the fact that this will ensure better control and governance over our project management.
Could I just come back on
If it's brief, yes.
My concern about the concession for the Ro-Ro is that it involves some kind of lease, and this document's already highlighted the concerns with the historic lease, which made us incredibly liable an issue for this berth to be replaced. So I do have concerns, and there must be a business case for that lease. We must know what that lease looks like, and there must be a threshold of, you know, this lease is not good enough or this lease is good enough. And also, I think we're all responsible for scrutiny. We need to scrutinise things at an individual council level, but also through the processes we have. Unfortunately, sometimes we're blocked from accessing or even calling in some of those processes. So there is an issue there. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, there are a lot of leases in this. We have over 300 known assets in this council, so there are a lot of leases out there and a lot of historical leases. And it is a profession. To be an expert on understanding leases and writing leases and confirming leases is a legal profession, which I would hesitate to say there's probably not any members in this organisation within the membership that have actually got that qualification. So, you know, we have to trust in our officers, and we have to trust in the professions within our officers, and that is a point that really needs to be made. We can't hang the officers that we've got now, the excellent officers we've got now, on the mistakes and the lack of, let's say, diligence that was used in the past. And we need to draw a line from the past and move forward. And I'm sure that going forward that everything is in place and all trust is within the Chief Executive and all of the management team to make sure that we don't have to revisit this type of situation. I probably can say that I bore the brunt of this. I came into take to leadership of the council, and Councillor Everett was trying to deal with the overrun, and then I came in and the overrun was still going on, and it was very vocal, and to be quite honest, over the time it was quite unpleasant to be anywhere near this project, which was no fault of any one particular person or one particular officer, but you know, we were all in it together. We've come out the other side, and I think it is time to draw the line and move on and learn the lessons that we've had. So, but thank you for your comments, and I'm sure that officers will respond accordingly. To speak under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader, and I also welcome this report and thank everybody who's been involved in putting it together. I think there's a lot of useful learning here, and I just want to pick up on 2 or 3 points. You highlighted, Leader, the role of scrutiny, and obviously that's why we're here. That's why we turn up regularly to Cabinet meetings to ask lists of sometimes awkward, sometimes pointless questions, because we want to know what's going on and we want to get the detail and we want to check our own understanding. And I think obviously we have to rely on the professional expertise of our officers in their various fields, but we also owe it to ourselves and to our community to understand as well as we can what's going on, to have proper explanations and to have things clarified for us where we don't understand things. And I think perhaps when we're looking at the member training programme, which I know Nick and colleagues have put a huge amount of work into, the new member training programme, which is looking really promising, perhaps something more about the role of scrutiny, the importance of scrutiny, how members of the Overview and Scrutiny panel can stand up to pressure when it is suggested to them that maybe they didn't want to support a call-in. Those kinds of things would be really helpful. And the role of all councillors in scrutinising what's going on, I think is going to be really important. There are councillors who are gobby like myself, there are councillors who are a great deal quieter, but we've all got our different roles to make sure that we're all happy with what is going on, or where we're not happy, at least we understand what's happening. And that takes me on to the issue about community engagement, because obviously part of the difficulty and the problems that you suffered yourself, Leader, and that Councillor Everett suffered when he was Leader, is about people misunderstanding what's going on, and part of that is about lack of transparency. And I think it's quite clear in this report that we need to be more open, we need to hide a great deal less behind commercial confidentiality, we need to trust our communities and make sure that they do know what's going on. And with that in mind, I think I'd like to pay tribute to the staff who are involved in the Roro Birth development, from the point of view that they have put everything online. All the details are there, the full reports and everything are all there. Any member of the public can look at those. On the other hand, we did have rather a rushed through experience of members' briefing and so on immediately before the Cabinet papers came out, and that wasn't ideal. But, you know, we are where we are, and we need to move forward on that. But I do hope that we can keep that level of transparency and information to members of the public. We've got a lot of very good stuff now on our website, and that hopefully will cut down the rumour mongering, the muttering, the stuff on social media. There was one other thing I think I want to say, which is just about project management, that I've been a bit taken aback by some of the gaps in some of our, for example, project initiation documents. I think I've mentioned it before, you know, project initiation documents with no risk assessments. I wouldn't have lasted long with those in my professional life, and I'm hoping that we can develop a way of working that officers are comfortable with, that gives Cabinet members and Council security in the information they've got, and that hopefully we can all train and develop an understanding of that together, so that one of the things I think I've nagged at Nick about is about the member training programme, also where at all possible being an officer training programme, so that we can learn stuff together, because I do believe that that's the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. I didn't detect a direct question in there. But, a couple of comments, really. I mean, there are times when the items are commercially sensitive, because the organisations that are putting in bids or offering tenders or whatever, they can't be named, and they don't want to be named. So, you know, you could release some information and it could be redacted, but then when you redact something, then that causes more conspiracy. So you do tend to go around a little bit in circles with that. But again, it comes down to the element of trust between members and officers. And in the past, that trust broke down. And I would imagine some of the delays, and we all know what went on here back in the day. And that it affected the whole functionality of the whole council. It wasn't just about this particular project, it was about virtually everything that was going on, because there was a dysfunctionality within the senior management team which had a knock-on effect on everything. So I think, as I keep trying to say, those days are past, and we'll come on to the next item on the agenda, which actually highlights that we believe those days are past, and we're looking forward now. And 2 years ago, I was very nervous about the whole situation and the whole governance, but now I'm very, very comfortable, and I can actually sleep at night again. I don't have to continuously worry about what's going to happen next, and I'm sure Councillor Everett, when he was leader, also had many sleepless nights about the situation, so and other previous leaders. So we're in a much more comfortable position because we have restored the trust between the senior officers and all officers and the Cabinet and through the membership. So I think that's to be highlighted, and take on board about your scrutiny as well. It is important, but Cabinet, I would say that Cabinet is not the place really for scrutiny. Most councils, this is probably one of the very, very few councils that actually take comments other than from the Cabinet. So we are quite open and transparent here. There's most councils, I think the Chief Executive has said that he finds our situation quite unusual here. Nobody gets to speak under 20.1 in any other council, and the Cabinet make the decision, and there's no discussion from the outside. So I think this council demonstrates a complete open and transparent and democratic process. So I'd just like to highlight that. Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As one of the previous other leaders that you referred to, I just wanted to make a comment, really, because I mean, I read this report. It's a good report, and yes, there's lots of lessons to be learnt there, and if we do the things that are in that report, we will be a much better operation for it. But I couldn't help get the feeling, reading it, how calm it all sounded. You know, it just sounded as sort of an organisation going about its business and getting a few things wrong. And it wasn't like that at all, really. And you know, there's talk about sort of being transparent and communicating with the public and whatever. I think what people forget is that round about the sort of 2018-2019 period here, there was a particularly vicious movement from outside that had nothing to do with whether it was, being given knowledge, information or whatever. It was a group of people who were on a mission to get what they wanted this council to do, and were prepared to say more or less anything to get that. I mean, some of the things that were put into the social media, some of the things that actually came in, emails and so on that came in, some of the things that were done, things that I've never seen before. We had people outside circulating all the members of council before a council meeting and saying the most scurrilous things in many, in many ways. Things that, some things may have had some truth in them, but a lot of things didn't. But there was no future in sort of standing up and saying that, because nobody wanted, those people didn't want to hear that. It's just, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? And I've got to say that the sort of calm that exists out there now is a much better environment for this council to flourish. So I think, it's wrong to say the public has a responsibility as well, but I think in many respects it kind of does. The community, can have an influence on what we do here. And it certainly, I would think, for sort of 18 months, 2 years, had a very bad influence on this council. And some of the behaviours that weren't right in this council were as a result of people sort of cowering under, scurrilous attacks that were, quite merciless at times. And, no good going on about it, but some of the things that were going on were just unbelievable. But it was nice to read that and look how calm it could have been.
Maybe it was a reverse, so it was the storm after the calm. I don't know which way around it was, but anyway, I've asked Cabinet to note this report. Do I have a seconder? Oh, I've got three. Which one would you like? Councillor Pugh. Do members agree? Item 4, implementation of the recommendations of the external auditor and the independent monitoring officer. That's a hell of a title, isn't it? So to introduce, I will do that as well. Soon after I became leader in summer 2021, the external auditor produced a report onto our council's governance arrangements. The conclusions reached were not comfortable for us, highlighting as they did significant disruption to the councillor-officer relationships, as well as between senior officers, and the need to thoroughly review our staffing procedures. A fundamental recommendation from the auditors was that we should commission a report from an independent monitoring officer from another large council who would look into those issues more thoroughly. We appointed Quintin Baker from Hertfordshire County Council, who worked very closely with myself and produced his report in May 2022. Since then, Mr Baker's report has been considered by Council and the recommendations approved. The previous statutory officers have left the Council and we have appointed new officers to take these positions. As leader, I have worked with those officers to ensure that the failings identified in each report have been addressed and the recommendations implemented. I'm very pleased that the interim Chief Executive and I are able to report to Cabinet and to Council next week. That apart from the long-term issues which are for the next Council, the recommendations have been implemented. Before I ask Cabinet to note the report, I would like to point out an amendment to the item 4 Annex 1, page 63, 2.1. We reported the progress. The progress is actually incorrectly reported. Advice has been taken from external lawyers and they have recommended to review more of the Constitution. Therefore, this recommendation will be reported at the next appropriate meeting due to the extended extent of the work that now needs to take place. So the progress report on 2.1 is incorrect and should be replaced accordingly to my wording there, which I can supply you after. So I wish members to take note of that. So I have moved this and I now go to Councillor Alban under 20.1.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to see this report, Leader. I think it's been a long journey, and for some of us who were part of the IDSC, looking into the senior management, it seems a long time ago now, but it was quite a heavy weight. I think it's something that I didn't get elected thinking that I would ever do, but we did that job diligently, and I think the end result has proved that we can move on. And again, and I'd just like to say I'm pleased to see the progress that has been made and that needed to be made. I have one comment and one question, Leader. The comment, in following on from the last item, about lessons learned, and I think one of the things that struck me through all of this process is that there needs to be, I would say, a better relationship between councillors and officers, and I don't necessarily mean that from cabinet point of view or the shadow cabinet point of view. I think it's from the backbenchers, if you like, that there's a lot of times when the backbenchers ask questions and they don't get answered, and that are left hanging, and that's a frustration for the backbenchers, and it's also a frustration for the residents who they're asking the questions for. So I think that's something that we as a council should take on, and we should look to see how we can progress that to make the relationships better. So that's my comment out of the way. The question that I had, Leader, is in relation to the outstanding tribunal cases. Obviously, I won't go into detail about those, but the question is, how many of these do we have still hanging on in abeyance somewhere, and as to whether or not that there are dates for those tribunals to be heard? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Can I just come back to your original comment? So you were referring to backbenchers asking questions. Were you referring to the questions that they asked at council meetings, or just in general? No,
Leader, it's just in general, when I think that there is, maybe I should have said this, I mean, in a current state of flux, if you like, that the council is in, not having all the directors in yet and whatever, and there seems to have been a changing around of various parts that councillors don't exactly know who's doing what and where, and who's leading and whatever, and I think that's something that the next council should have in place, and that is who the directors are, who the officers are in relation to those areas that are dealing with it, who the managers are, etc., etc., and for there to be a directly written process for those, for our councillors who are not in cabinet or shadow cabinet, to be able to ask. And I think that's just to make it an easier task, actually, for both councillors and officers.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Orban. I mean, I can remember when I first became a councillor, it was horrendously confusing. But what made it worse was that, I mean, I came from a big corporate that if you didn't have a structure chart, then you would have wandered around the corridors of Aon House forever and never found anybody that you needed to talk to. So I think the Chief Executive, by putting the structure in place and the actual work and progress that has gone on regarding the whole structure, I think when the Colin Carmichael came in here, he couldn't actually find a structure chart, which was very worrying, and that was discussed at GPC. But so we've come on leaps and bounds from where we were, but obviously there are some gaps in roles that need to be filled, and the progress from there will come about how the communication lines open up. I think maybe back in the day things were too far that way, where members could just absolutely ask anyone any question and all the time, which is very hard to plan your workload when you've got members continuously asking questions. And then it went completely the other way, where members weren't even allowed to ask anybody anything other than the directors of service, which obviously that isn't the way to do it, because then the officers underneath that would then feel, well, what am I here for then? You know, there was a complete imbalance. It went from one extreme to the other, but somewhere in the middle is what we've got to be aiming for, and I have every confidence that the new management team will find that balance. But obviously the posts have got to be filled first, so hopefully that sort of clears that part
Leader,
up.
I'm always happy to give officers advice should they require it.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. I'm going to hand over to the Chief Executive regarding the outstanding cases. I think I sort of know the answer, but obviously that's outside of my remit, because it is a staffing matter, so the Chief Executive can hopefully give you an answer on that.
Yes, I can, Leader. There are two outstanding. One is in mediation in the next month or so, and we'll have to see how that goes. The second is heading to a tribunal, and we don't have a date for that, but it's pretty likely to be midway or even late 2024. There's a huge backlog in tribunals at the moment. Could I just briefly comment, Lead, just to
Certainly.
support what you say? We're not like the civil service in a council. We are here to support all councillors. Primary job of the officers is to support Cabinet, but our job is to support the whole council. And there'll have to be a limit, of course, to the number of questions coming in. You can't deal with 300 a day, but backbenchers are entitled to ask questions, and officers have a duty to answer, is where I come from, and I'm sure that's where the management team comes from as well. So I'd agree with you. Particularly, I'd hope, well, the Cabinet has had a list of projects since last July, which CMT has dealt with, and we have been bringing them through the Cabinet for decision making, and I would certainly hope after the election that the next council has a similar corporate plan or Cabinet plan of some kind, against which we'll put lead officers and report on a regular basis about progress and decisions that are needed on those. So I'm with you on all of that. I think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Next to speak under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. And I'm going to reflect, I think, some of what Councillor Alban said. I think this is a very encouraging report. There's a lot, we have learnt a lot, we have made a lot of progress. I'd like to thank you particularly for putting yourself out there and making such an effort to get us to where we are. And I'd like to thank Colin and senior staff for all their efforts in this regard. I share Councillor Alban's worry about information access for backbench councillors, and the extra stress that puts on officers if information isn't easily available to start off with. And picking up on what you said, Leader, about Mr Carmichael not having experience in other councils of members speaking under Rule 20.1, I'm sure he does have experience in other councils of members having access to the intranet. The LGA is the first thing that they will tell our new councillors to do, is to go on your council's intranet. We can't do that. We don't have that access to that information. That means we are constantly having to ask silly questions to officers and waste their time and hours on that when we could just be looking it up. That really is something that needs to be considered to the benefit of all, because there is no disadvantage in that, and there's considerable advantage to hard-pressed officers and councillors. However, I would have to take issue with item 4.2 on page 64 being shaded in green, where it says improve responsiveness to information requests from councillors to officers. Yes, that has improved. and put in place mechanisms that will ensure that key information about TDC decisions and activities affecting local wards is disseminated to relevant ward councillors. No, I'm sorry. A lot of that is still not happening. We've got a long way to go on that. Yes, if you want to use the word improve in the sense that, yes, we've moved a bit forward, we have. But I don't think that's a green. I think that's an orange. We really have got some way to go on that. And that's not a criticism of officers. It's about culture. It's about everybody's understanding of who needs what information, and it's something that I think we can develop together and that the new council can take forward with officers and members together. But I do think there is still an issue about that, as Councillor Alban has highlighted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Austin. I mean, obviously, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? But I mean, if we do look back into the dark days, what Councillor Alban was referring to, a lot of members, there were 6 people that really bore the brunt of this on their shoulders, and so we're probably more aware of how far we've come from those days than anybody else in this council. It is a million miles, and it's been done in a relatively short space of time. I must admit that in June 21, I didn't dream that we would actually be at this stage now. So I actually think we've done an amazing job, and it's actually recognised not just here, but it is recognised throughout the whole of the county. I probably received more comments about how well we've done from outside of the council looking in than what we get from ourselves. I mean, I'm not saying that we all should go around patting ourselves on the back, but it has been an amazing achievement, and under all of the odds, against all the odds, we owe a lot to the next layer down of management in this council, because they actually held this place together. This could have crashed and burned 2 years ago and we would have been in special measures, but if it wasn't for them. So I think that needs to be recognised, and I think everybody's very critical about they don't get the answers, they don't get what they need, and sometimes I think, I mean, I get questions which I think, well, you could have quite easily have found that out yourself. I take your point about the intranet. I don't know about, I think I probably need to ask you to be more specific, not here tonight, but to be more specific about what you're referring to. But, you know, seeing some of these directors, the volume of emails they get, I mean, I get a volume of emails. I get on average 70, 80 emails a day, which I didn't even get that when I was full-time working as an operations director for a multinational company. Some of the senior officers here get something like 200 emails a day. So I think backbenchers, maybe they need to spend a day in the life of some of these officers to actually understand about how much stuff they get and why maybe they don't come back in the time scales that they actually think. But what I would say, a lot of the reason that these officers get that volume of email is because a lot of them have stepped up to fill gaps that have been left behind in the wake of sorting out all of the problems that we had before. So I'm sure that going forward, once all the positions are filled and everybody understands where they're going and where their responsibilities lie, and maybe the new influx of members that haven't been trained in the way that they should have been, because they came in 2019 when we were in a bit of flux, to say the least. So I think with all the training that's there, members understanding about where they can go and how they can get the information, and taking some of the weight of the information required from the officers, because the job structure is better. So I think they do an amazing job, and under the circumstances that we've got. But I can only see this getting better. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes a while to do this stuff. But I think we've come an amazing distance in the short time. So, but take on board. I mean, if you want to be more specific about your intranet problem, I'd be interested to hear that. I'm sure Hannah would be very interested to hear that as well, so that we can see what specifically you're referring to. So if you'd like to just write to me and let me know, then we can have a conversation on that. So, Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Again, just a minor point really, but I think it's quite important. I mean, we hear lots of comments where members are saying, oh, you know, we don't get the information, we can't find out things, we can't get to talk to who we want to talk to. And we get a lot of situations where I think the members are not actually representing the council back to the population. You know, I mean, there's plenty coming this way with, you know, sort of members coming on and championing a particular beef that a resident's got, but there should be stuff going the other way, because often you get the councillors bringing in problems. They know the answers to those. You know, they know what should be happening. They know what the residents should have done. I mean, particularly say for reporting a missed bin or something like that. But don't do that, and just bring it into the council. And, you know, sort of, if you like, stand alongside the residents and, oh, yeah, it's disgusting, they haven't picked your bin up. You know, the fact that the resident didn't put it out before 6 o'clock or whatever is irrelevant. So I do think there's a responsibility that goes both ways on this, I really do.
Thank you. I think that's all my speakers on this item. So I have asked the Cabinet to acknowledge the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor David Saunders. Do members agree? I believe that concludes our